You're listening to the Fan2Fan Podcast, and on this episode, we continue our conversation about comfort watch movies. From sci-fi to martial arts to comedies to Ray Harryhausen stop-motion classics, we're covering them all. Get ready? Here we go. Welcome to the Fan2Fan Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Bernie Gonzalez. With me today, fellow co-host Pete Charbonneau, and we've been having a conversation about comfort watch movies and TV shows. Those movies and TV shows that you can just put on anytime when you need them, on a Saturday afternoon, if you're taking a sick day and you're not feeling well, or you just want to lean on something that you know will just make you feel good because maybe something's not going on good at work or in your life, and you just want to get a little up. So you pop in that movie, you stream that TV show that you know will always get you going right. I think it's fair to say, Pete, you and I are products of a certain era, 70s and 80s TV and movies, and those have really informed not only our childhoods, but our list, our comfort watch suggestions that we've kind of thrown out there during these conversations. In the previous episode, we talked about a lot of Doug McClure movies, The Land That Time Forgot, At the Earth's Core, The People That Time Forgot, and those were just those sort of like pulpy serial matinee type movies that were a lot of fun to watch as we were growing up. All right, so from Doug McClure, I think there's another person that we've talked about a little bit, and that's Ray Harryhausen.
Oh, sure.
Clash of the Titans, Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, Three Worlds of Gulliver, Mysterious Island, Jason and the Argonauts, Valley of Kwangi.
Yeah, I literally just watched Mysterious Island again the other night. That one is right up there for me too.
Out of the depths of the sea, out of the imagination of the world's greatest adventure writer comes the most dynamic motion picture ever filmed. Civil War prisoners make a daring escape only to be hurled thousands of miles by a violent hurricane to Jules Verne's Mysterious Island. 20,000 leagues beyond your wildest dreams as 5 men and 2 women battle a murderous horde of pirates. Journey to the center of your wildest imagination as they fight for survival against nature gone berserk. The world has seen many Jules Verne predictions come true, but none so real, so terrifying as those you see in the excitement and dangers of Mysterious Island. See Columbia Pictures' Mysterious Island in Super Dynamation and Eastman color.
That was one of those weekday afternoon showings that I just could not get enough of. And pure escapist fantasy. This one, again, has a bit of a slow build-up, but like an interesting one. I always thought, my memories from being younger are of like the giant bird when it jumps into the corral on the island. It's the giant bees when the couple are like kind of trapped in the honeycomb. That stuff is like embedded in my brain. And that's some of Ray Harryhausen at his finest. But again, like interestingly enough, like this movie starts out like during the Civil War and got a bunch of Union soldiers that have been captured in Virginia. And there's a storm brewing. There's a big balloon. A journalist gets captured and he's brought into this prison as the Union soldiers are planning their big escape. And so he gets wrapped up with them. They're able to escape into the balloon with a Confederate soldier. And then, because the storm blows them wildly off course because they're in Virginia, somehow they end up a couple of thousand miles from New Zealand, coming down on the titular Mysterious Island and encounter some very large animals, including a giant crab. That's like the first big, set piece of the movie. And they have to fight for survival on this place that they're unsure what they're getting themselves into. There's like a bit of a mystery because the Union captain, they find him away from the rest of the group and he is passed out, but there's a fire and he doesn't recall building the fire. So they're like, well, how did this happen? And it's revealed later, spoiler alert, that it's Captain Nemo of, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea fame. And he is licking his wounds, or I should say the Nautilus is licking its wounds from the events at the end of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. And he's had a change of heart from his character in that story and now wants to use his knowledge for good. And, he's basically trying to engineer food sources for the world. So that hence the giant animals. Some pirates come along at one point. They sink the pirate ship, and then that, of course, becomes their potential means for escape at the end. Because again, we've got another grumpy volcano that Deus Ex Machina is just going to erupt for no real reason other than we need to ramp up, the tension and will they escape? And so there's just a lot to love about this. Huge comfort watch for me. I just love this movie so much. It's paced really well. Again, not dinosaurs, not monsters, but you've got like the giant bees, the giant crab. So there's that danger element, and it's fantastical. And it's just a fun story. Jules Verne. So again, we've got another literary, source material from which to spring from. And I just love that movie.
And I think there's something about that idea of escapism, but also like survival, where, you kind of get away from it all. And, I think there was something really interesting about that as a kid. I want to escape and have adventure, life on the high seas, and fight pirates. And Mysterious Island checks all of those boxes, because just when you think this is cool on its own, because I would love to be on an island, a mysterious island with a bunch of my friends, and then you get to fight giant bees. Check. You get through that, you notch it up by bringing in Captain Nemo. Perfect Saturday afternoon vibe with a lot of those Harryhausen movies. Really good at balancing like sci-fi, fantasy, adventure. I want more time on the island with these people. If I ever want to revisit it, it's one that I do pop in fairly frequently. I feel like every few years, the disc gets a spin.
And one of the things I love about it is that, again, being a film of its time, I want to say this was like an early 60s production. There's that mixture of, you've got your matte paintings, you've got your Ray Harryhausen stop motion animation, you've got your location shots. I believe like the island stuff was shot at a resort beach in Spain. There's the sets. Like I don't know if this was like Shepperton Studios or Pinewood Studios, but those are names that, again, growing up, these British film studios, like so much stuff shot and built on sound stages there. And so there's some of that too. So there's some of that stuff that's clearly soundstage, but it's the amalgamation. It's all of it coming together to make something that, again, like your mileage may vary on how much you, especially if you watch it now, and if you're of a younger generation, kind of growing up on CGI and what computer graphics can do as far as immersion. But again, there's something with the way that the filmmaking was then, where all of this stuff comes together. Again, I don't think this was like a super big budget production, but it feels larger than it is.
Yes.
It feels expansive. Like, it's never difficult for me to put myself into the shoes of the characters, that they're on this island that's in the middle of nowhere in the Pacific Ocean. The ease of which that you can suspend your disbelief in movies like this, I always saw as one of its greatest strengths, and probably one of the reasons why I love it so much, is that it's really kind of effortless. Like, you're not there picking apart every little thing. I mean, you can. There's certain, it's certainly not a flawless film by any stretch of the imagination, but it's just so well done. All the elements are there. The sum of its parts just leaves me with that warm, fuzzy feeling every time I watch it. And again, like I was looking for something the other night. Yeah, it's time. It's been a while since I've seen Mysterious Island, and let's go back and revisit the old friend. And, it never disappoints.
The original script for Mysterious Island was merely how to survive on a desert island. It was a wonderful Jules Verne story to read, but it was definitely dated. And in order to keep an audience in a theater for an hour and a half, we had to inject certain elements that we felt from the experience in making the seventh voyage were very necessary to Mysterious Island. So I made a series of drawings of visuals that I felt could be included. When we first started considering rewriting the script, we thought we'd inject the prehistoric element. We were going to have the island with many dinosaurs and a prehistoric concept, some of which is still in the picture, only modified. When Cy Enfield came on the picture, we decided that through many conferences that it would be better to bring it up to date and not use the prehistoric concept. So we we used the concept of Captain Nemo devising the means of growing wheat 10 feet high and enlarging the crab to account for all these strange creatures on the island. So there's a little mixture of 2 or 3 scripts which ended up in the final picture.
I think something you brought up too with a lot of those movies, they had a scale that was only benefited by the matte paintings. They had that the Technicolor. It was meant to look epic, to feel epic. And I think something that you brought up that it goes back to all of these movies, there was a sense of mythology in like world building. And again, for 2 people who were very easy to like lose their imagination, these movies, like at the Earth's core, warring tribesmen, and there's all this stuff going on. Even before I get into this world, there is a world that exists. So as a kid, like I want to pull out the map. Just when you think you're done, all right, now you throw in the wrinkle that is Nemo. There is a world building that's already happened. And then on top of that, you can throw on top of that with your own imagination. If there's a giant crab, King Kong could be on the other side of the island. Mm-hmm. This could be Skull Island. It's just mysterious, but it could be Skull Island too. And if that's true, Godzilla could be in the water. Like it's all fair game.
Yeah. That's a great point that you make, because I'm just thinking about this now that you're talking about it. You know, you watch a movie like this and you get like those set pieces. You get the crab, you get the bees, you get the giant bird.
And then you get the conversation after the birds and the bees.
Exactly. Yes. Thankfully, all the people were grown-ups on the island. So hopefully easier conversation to have. But it again, like, it opens up your imagination of, well, what else is on this island that we're not seeing? You know, and again, that's that world building that you're talking about, because you know that there's other creatures and things or plant life that are somewhere else on this island that we just never get to see, but they're there. And that's the beauty of a film like that, where your mind can wander, and like you're talking about, like I want to go back to visit that island. And there's something about these movies that made you want to be there and sharing the adventure of what you were seeing on screen, or in my case, often I would daydream about, and you mentioned this too, being there with my friends. Like if we got stranded on something like this, like how would we maybe survive?
Marshall, Will, and Holly on a routine expedition met the greatest earthquake ever known. Struck their tiny raft and plunged them down 1,000 feet below to the land of the lost. Come on, guys, get out of here! Come on, Holly, let's go!
With this movie, with the tie-in to Land of the Lost, where they find like the cave up in the cliff face that they end up turning into their home for that brief period of time while they're trying to build a boat to get off the island. Same with the Land of the Lost. They find that cave that they're living in. Where do I sign the lease for this cave? Because I'll live in either of these places. This is the most amazing thing ever.
So along with the Sinbad movies, there's one in this Ray Harryhausen world that I wanted to also mention too, because I have to think it's on your list, Jason and the Argonauts.
Now from the makers of Sinbad, Jason and the Argonauts, a man and his mighty band of warriors in search of the fabulous magic golden fleece. Battling the bronze giant, Talos, the vulturous Harpies, the dreaded seven-headed Hydra, the merciless army of skeletons. Jason and the Argonauts in spectacular dinorama from Columbia Pictures, rated G.
It's one of those where I think I always saw it in bits and pieces when I was a kid, and I finally saw it when I was older, and I really enjoyed it, but it doesn't hold that same status with me just because I didn't watch it in full when I was younger.
My buddies Chris and Dre, when we always talk about some of these movies we grew up on, if it was a movie that kind of got past you, like Jason and the Argonauts did for you, the mileage varies on visiting the movie versus revisiting the movie later in your life. And I think of like a Monster Squad.
Mhm.
And that's like a movie that I didn't watch as a kid, but everyone I know has watched it. So when I finally saw it, along with Fright Night, those were two movies that I saw more recently. And there was also that part of me that's like, everyone loves these two films.
Mhm.
So what if they don't live up to Lost Boys? That would be awful. But turns out quite the opposite. So I'm kind of glad to hear that while you enjoyed Jason and the Argonauts, even though it wasn't a thing from the past, you still enjoyed it in the present.
Yeah. And, just to speak briefly on, I'm one of the people that saw Monster Squad later in life. And so
Okay.
I get the reverence for it. It didn't hit with me the same way because I didn't see it when I was younger. So,
Sure.
but that's the beauty of these things because, I love the fact that it has like this uber passionate fan base of people that grew up on it and like think it's like the greatest thing ever. I'm like, that's amazing. I love that. It doesn't work that way for me because I did not have the luxury of seeing it when I was younger. But to your point with like Jason and the Argonauts, I feel that it slots in so well with like all the Sinbad movies. And I have a hard time separating each of the Sinbad movies with the exception of Eye of the Tiger because I didn't even realize this when I was a kid, but that came out in like 77. So I think that came out, I was like 5. I just always assumed that it was like all the other Sinbad movies and was like from the 60s or early 70s. So it was actually a new movie when I first saw it as opposed to one of those older ones.
Enter the forbidden shrine of the 4 elements as the visual sorcery of Dinorama swirls you through danger after danger after danger. The monster hornet, Walrus Giganticus, Mammoth Minotaur, in the newest and most spectacular Sinbad adventure of them all, Sinbad and the Eye of the Tiger. Rated G.
Starts Wednesday at theaters everywhere. Check your paper for theater or drive-in near you.
A lot of that stuff kind of molds into like one full movie because they're all very similar, set in a similar world, time frame, all of that. But with the Ray Harryhausen special effects, with all the stop motion stuff, like I could pop on any of them, just immerse myself right into all of those.
Yes. Well, they have that same A Land That Time Forgot at the Earth's core type energy. You could have a double feature and watch them both on a Saturday afternoon, and it doesn't matter the order. You could sit down and watch all 3 Sinbad movies back to back to back. You're there for the Harryhausen effects anyway. It really doesn't matter who Sinbad is.
Right. Do you have a favorite among those Sinbad films? Like, is there one that you gravitate towards more than the others?
I would go with Seventh Voyage. It's the first. There's just something about that one that I enjoy most. And, that's the connection to Jason and the Argonauts, where in Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, you get the one skeleton. In Jason and the Argonauts, you get the army of skeletons. So there's something kind of neat about that. You get the Cyclops, the Snake Woman in Seventh Voyage. Jason and the Argonauts, you get the skeleton, you get the harpies. So like you really can't go wrong. But I do feel if someone said, hey, I only have time for one Sinbad, I'm like, well, one, you are awful at time management. You should always have more than you have for 2 Sinbads. But if you only had one, it's Seventh Voyage. And even I think in the Mount Rushmore of Ray Harryhausen, we haven't talked that much about Clash of the Titans, Valley of Kwangi. Like those are there as well. But I'd be like, yeah, if you're going to carve out a space for one Sinbad, it's just Seventh Voyage, Jason and the Argonauts, Mysterious Island, and then after that, Dealer's Choice.
I'll say I'll jump in with probably this has to be my number 1 comfort watch. We've talked about a lot of them. 70s Godzilla movies are always going to be in there. Talked about the Planet of the Apes movies. I feel like that's a separate episode in and of itself. But for me, the number 1 has always been Journey to the Center of the Earth.
This lump of lava you gave me is 1 in 10 million. 3 notches made by the hand of man. It's unthinkable, but it must be true. A man went where no human being has ever set foot. Into the interior of the Earth. We know less about the Earth we live on than about the stars and the galaxies of outer space. The greatest mystery is right here, right under our feet.
I neglected to tell you, sir, I have a nervous fear of heights.
You'll get over that after the first 1,000,000 fathoms or so. here, hundreds of kilometers beneath the surface of the Earth, we enter the great book of history. Ladies and gentlemen, this is James Mason. Come along with Pat Boone and me, Arlene Dole, Diane Baker,
And Gertrude.
and Gertrude the Duck, and discover sights and sounds and wonders no living man has ever witnessed before. Here, at the center of the Earth.
A lot of the movies that we've talked about so far, while they are wildly entertaining and some of them are legitimately good films, I feel like Journey to the Center of the Earth is one of those that is legit held in very high regard.
Okay.
On top of just being such a great story, adapted from Jules Verne, so you've got the source material. But you know, I love how they kind of took the right kind of liberties with all that source material. Because I remember trying to read Mysterious Island, and I've read Journey to the Center of the Earth. It's a lot of scientifically dense stuff, and you can tell, like, okay, well, you know a lot about all this. I'm like, I don't know if that makes for a compelling novel, but well,
it's got that like Tolkien level of world building, right? Like,
yeah,
Burroughs and Jules Verne, you kind of get the same thing.
But yeah, Journey to the Center of the Earth. I mean, James Mason, fantastic, always just a compelling watch. The story is great. You know, again, it's discovery. It's a period piece, but the stakes get set pretty early. Another one that takes its time. It builds it up. Like, it starts out in Scotland, and then they're in Iceland. But there's even the build up because, you know, there's a bit of a mystery that they're trying to track down one of the explorers who ends up being murdered, and so like his widow ends up coming along for the ride. Pat Boone is in it, singing some songs along the way. You know, again, shot on location. I don't know if it was Carlsbad Caverns. It's in some caverns. So some of the set pieces are gorgeous. You've got some live action lizards that probably would not fly today when you've got like these lizards kind of attacking each other, or, you know, at least it looked that way on screen. But, you know, kind of dinosaurs, but they're not like the thrust of the film. A lot of it is just about the exploration of making their way to the center of the Earth. And you've got Count Saknussemm as the baddie that's kind of tracking our intrepid crew along the way. This movie, it's just so much fun. It's so much fun from set piece to set piece when they find like the giant mushrooms. They're eating the mushrooms. And, you know, again, this was something that I always would put myself in. Like, I put myself into this group or into with my friends. Like, what would our adventure be like journeying into the, you know, the core of the Earth?
That's right. Are there any honorable mentions that you wanted to throw out there for these kind of comfort watches?
You know, with the advent of things like MeTV.
For sure. Yes.
You know, I was going down rabbit holes of watching Charlie's Angels and Welcome Back, Kotter. And there's something about the way like some of those 70s shows were made, you know, even going back further than that. Like, it's so formulaic. I mean, bring that forward to 80s and not like Saved by the Bell is total comfort watch. Like, every episode is basically the same with minor variations, but easily bite off like 5-6 episodes at a time if you had the time to kill, because they're just, call it like junk food or snack food or whatever you want. It's still that shit's entertaining. So
it's all sugar, baby. It's all good. It's all good.
And sugar is so good for you.
That's right. I'm going to cheat. I can't just do one, Pete. So a lot of these movies, I have to guess, Pete, you've certainly watched them. Maybe they will also have made it on your recommends list as I throw them out there. Time Machine, the 1960 movie, directed by George Pell.
The Time Machine. Now from MGM comes the picture that crashes the time barrier, that takes you on an exciting romantic journey into the future. 800,000 years into the future, that shows you the shape of things to come. The Time Machine. George Pell's production of H.G. Wells' fabulous novel, The Time Machine. You are there as the years fly by, faster than the speed of light. The years unfold before you, age after age of endless time. The Time Machine.
rocketing across the giant screen in flaming color. See the future before it happens. The Time Machine, rated G.
Rod Taylor, the Morlocks, the Eloi, again, talk about escapism, a movie that I know your father's a huge fan of, and that's Flash Gordon.
Join us for the fantastic adventures of Flash Gordon. Flash uses football to fight his enemy, Ming the Merciless.
Glidus, are your men on the right vitamins?
Will Flash's strategy prove successful? Will he survive? Find out now at a theater near you. Music by Queen, rated PG.
We've talked about Star Wars, the impact it had, how movies like Star Crash, Battle Beyond the Stars, they didn't scratch that itch like Star Wars movies did, but there's just something so firmly tongue-in-cheek about Flash Gordon and its pulp influences and the score, the music. Yeah, like watching that on a Saturday afternoon, if Star Crash was on, Carolyn Monroe, I mean, I'm paying attention. Battle Beyond the Stars, it's basically Hannibal Smith in the A-Team, but in space. I'm in. But Flash Gordon, I love it. It's amazing.
Now, have you seen any of like the original series, like with Buster Crabbe?
I have, yeah. And I think there's a charm about those that actually you have to look at those separate than the Flash Gordon movie. Not the same. It's kind of its own thing, like old time radio. You know, the Shadow Inner Sanctum. It's kind of like, it feels like it's in that world to me.
Yeah, for sure. What struck me, because I just went and started watching the serials recently, just out of curiosity. I mean, they're so goofy. And so like, I feel like the distance between that and Flash Gordon, like the 80 movie, is not as far as you would think. I mean, the movie, I'd say, is definitely camping it up, but the serial is kind of campy too, which was making me think only because of my dad's reaction to the movie, which he hated so much.
Sure.
But when you go back and watch the serial now, I'm just kind of like, there's not yes, they're different, but there's not a ton of daylight between the two. For my dad to be like, you know, thinking that this was like tarnishing whatever his memories of like the original serial might have been.
Sure.
Like,
yeah. Well, you also think too, like those serials were made for kids. The cliffhanger element in like, hey, we're going to get kids to come back the next Saturday to watch the next installment. You know, it's like when you see that scene in A Christmas Story and, you know, Ralphie's got the decoder thing and he's listening to Little Orphan Annie. It's that, like, it's meant to be serial installments, chapters. That's what those things were.
There's no reason to be afraid.
Birds are not aggressive creatures, miss. They bring beauty into the world.
That might be true for one bird, but thousands of birds? That's a different story.
I hardly think a few birds are going to bring about the end of the world.
I think you're the cause of all this. I think you're evil!
One of the most terrifying films of all time. The Birds.
Another one that I always revisit and is a huge comfort watch for me is Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds. Again, I think it was just the time that I saw it. It was accessible to me being younger because it's not a monster movie, but it's a thriller in that regard. And so where something like Dial M for Murder or North by Northwest or, you know, Rear Window, if I saw that when I was younger, I probably would have been kind of bored or just like it would have lost me. The Birds was able to hit me on that visceral level because it was more relatable to me, like the story was. Again, it's all just set apart of my memories of when I saw it. That was my introduction to Alfred Hitchcock, aside from reading Alfred Hitchcock Presents the Three Investigators mystery books when I was a kid, which are fucking phenomenal young readers. But yeah, so then it kind of stemmed from that. But yeah, maybe we'll tackle that on a separate episode.
And if you're playing Rod Taylor bingo, you might be closer after.
That's what triggered it. When you mentioned
Time
Rod
Machine.
Taylor in Time Machine, I'm like, yeah, Rod Taylor's in The Birds.
There you go.
You've never heard of him.
Who are
you?
Only the president and 3 others know he exists.
Stop!
We've got a problem, George. Some joker walks into one of my plants, but now you're telling me he doesn't exist?
The only weapons he needs are his mind and his body.
Who are you?
Now, there's a new name in high adventure. Remo Williams, The Adventure Begins. Rated PG-13. Opens Friday, October 11th at theaters everywhere.
Remo Williams, The Adventure Begins, with Fred Ward and Joe Gray. This movie seemed to be perpetually on Saturday afternoons for me. It was just left of center of James Bond because it was certainly pulp inspired, but firmly tongue-in-cheek based on the Destroyer pulp series. Again, it's Fred Ward. He knows the movie he's in. This guy is the James Bond that I would want to be, where he's a little rough around the edges. He's not suave. He's not debonair, but he's cool. As much as it is escapism, like he's relatable. And because of that, it starts with The Adventure Begins, left me wondering, like, what is Remo Williams 2 going to happen? There has to be more. The adventure continues, and it's been threatened so many times. And my buddy Dre and I are such big fans of this movie that there's that part of us that as much would want to see it remade. There's a part of it that is like the magic behind Flash Gordon that your dad didn't like, but we kind of enjoyed, is because it's tongue-in-cheek. Same with Remo Williams. If you tried to do the gritty, edgy version of this, it just wouldn't work. It wouldn't feel like it's Remo Williams. And I know someone who's read the Destroyer books would say, well, that's actually not what Remo Williams is to me. And I'm like, I get it. This is just a movie that I saw countless Saturday afternoons.
Yeah.
So that's what's in my head. That's what I remember. Do I revisit this movie often? Heck yeah. I love this movie.
That's great. I haven't seen that since I didn't see it in the theater, but I probably saw it shortly after it came out. So I might need a rewatch of that.
I'm going to throw 2 more out there. One, totally cheesy. Made for TV movies were a thing when we were growing up. It's Killer Fish.
Killer Fish. From a robbery that's incredible, to a rendezvous that's undetectable, to a recovery that's impossible. On an island paradise, they search for treasure, they search for pleasure, and they search for flesh. Killer Fish. The terror will tear you to pieces. Rated PG.
It's a movie that was made for TV that stars Lee Majors, Karen Blank. I remember watching this as a kid, and I'm only watching it because it's Lee Majors. Let's get that out of the way right now. That's the only reason to watch it. $6 Million Man. But it's basically a really cheesy made-for-TV movie by Antonio Margheriti, who directed Ark of the Sun God. Nick, there you go. You have won bingo. And it's basically just a jewel heist, except the bad guy has put piranhas in like the area around the island so that none of the people he's hired to do the heist on his behalf can escape with the jewels. It's so cheesy, Pete. I think you would love every minute of this movie. And it was riffed by Mystery Science Theater. I thought I was the only person who had watched that movie. So I would 100% recommend, Pete, watch Killer Fish, since I don't think it's a movie you're familiar with.
No. And, the world can't get enough of Lee Majors. So, I mean, more Majors is my motto. I mean, I say it. It's my mantra, really, actually. I say it every morning upon waking.
Always time for more Majors. It's got Gary Collins in it. So, I mean...
yeah, that guy was like a staple of like 70s like game shows.
Absolutely, 100%. Last movie I'm going to throw out there, and I know it's a movie that you and I will share an affinity for, Pete. It's 1984's Top Secret.
Oh, God.
Looking for a video that will make you laugh out loud? Then catch Val Kilmer in his undercover comedy where East meets West.
Wie Karl Baum in my Guten Morgen-Liste. What the hell did you say to him? Nothing. I just told him I'd put his name on the Montgomery Ward mailing list.
Hillary.
That's an unusual name.
It's a German name. It means she whose bosoms defy gravity.
It seems that you have become, how do you say, indispensable?
Indispensable? I'm not the first guy who fell in love with a girl he met in a restaurant who then turned out to be the daughter of a kidnapped scientist, only to lose her to her childhood lover who she'd last seen on a deserted island and who turned out 15 years later to be the leader of the French underground.
I know it. It all sounds like some bad movie.
When the creators of Airplane and The Naked Gun set out to make a spy spoof, the laughs fall hard on the East German High Command in Top Secret.
Val Kilmer, Peter Cushing. It's such a classic movie. I loved this movie. Okay, as a fan, as a lover of Airplane 1 and 2. And then this, yeah, there were many a Saturday afternoons, Pete, that I was watching this. So I don't know if it was a Saturday afternoon comfort watch type movie for you, but I know you love Top Secret as much as I do.
Oh, I do. And I saw this opening weekend in the theater in upstate.
Holy
New York.
shit.
I can still remember going to see it. And in keeping with my dad's stories, my dad's brother, my Uncle Mike, we came out of this. My brother and I were like, this was the greatest movie we've ever seen. So my aunt or someone mentioned like, oh, that lead actor, Val Kilmer, she said something to the effect of, oh, that Val Kilmer, I think this was his first role. I wonder if he'll go on to do something else. And my Uncle Mike's like, destined to remain a nobody. His hot take on Val Kilmer's performance in that. But
your Uncle Mike should have kept his take on ice, man.
He should have, because Uncle Mike, not the first time that he was just way off in a prediction.
He is no Top Gun, let me tell you.
No, he is not.
Some might say he's not a real genius either.
Oh.
Sorry, Uncle Mike. I'm sure you're good people.
I mean, for my money, one of the greatest lines in movie history of, I'm sorry, I don't speak German. I know a little German. He's sitting over there.
Oh, man.
Little person in the Bavarian outfit stands up. Doffs his hat. I mean,
I love this movie. So
God,
good.
if I could have written that line, I would retire happy.
And I think the reason why this movie sticks with me is with any musical, I feel like you're playing the game in hard mode, right? Because you need the story, but the music has to deliver on the promise. Because if I always think like Spinal Tap. Spinal Tap works. Christopher Guest movies work because of the authenticity. And I think that's something about Top Secret, where it's like, if you're already kind of making fun of these World War II flicks, and then you're adding on top of that a little bit of espionage and James Bond tongue in cheek, then on top of that, you're adding like Zucker Abrams level type humor.
Mm-hmm.
And then on top of that, you're adding music, and it has to be good, and it has to be short, but it has to be just right. And it has to be like sung well by someone like Val Kilmer, who again, knows the movie he's in. Yeah, I could watch this and it just feels like I'm a kid again, watching it again on a Saturday afternoon. It puts a smile on my face. And I think that's at the core of the Comfort Watch episode theme. Like Pee-wee's Big Adventure. That's another movie that I had on the stack where I'm like, I could toss this in and Paul Rubens just makes me smile, just like Val Kilmer does in Top Secret. That's the magic of these movies. There's just something great about them.